This is part 2 of crumbling foundation replacement. People always ask, how do you even start for a lift? How you start is you make some beam pocket holes so that when the lifter comes in, he can slide his beams in underneath the building. Most of these beam pocket holes were done from outside with our skid steer and hammer. I know they look kind of big. That's because the foundation is such in terrible shape that hammering it just a little bit will often result in a big chunk coming out. These two beams here, beam pocket holes here, were done from the inside of the house because they are both under the sunroom. I get an awful lot of comments from people thinking that the plumbing and the electrical all needs to be redone, and that's just not true. We remove what we need to remove to lift the building, but everything else is up there. Electrical just gets moved up out of the way. The plumbing gets cut off at the wall height level, but everything is there. When we put everything back in, everything's tested to make sure that it all works, and we really don't have any problems with having to rewire or replumb other than from top of wall down. The electrical box actually goes up with the building, so even that doesn't get disconnected at all. It just swings up and goes up with the building. So this is the slab on grade breezeway. The lifter's gonna have to run some beams underneath that chimney, underneath the brick. So we have to dig out all of this dirt here. We've been bailing some of it into the garage, and then it gets baled out of the garage and stockpiled for later use. In the garage, there's going to be 4 crib stacks, 1 in each corner. So we do a rough dig. The crib stacks have to be on virgin ground, so we have to dig down to the bottom of the footing. And then when the lifters come in, they dig it by hand to make it a more precise hole. So the only things that don't get removed in the basement are, of course, the lolly columns, which are holding up the main beam, and the lolly column pads that are underneath there. The heating chimney is just a block chimney that will have to be taken apart, supported from the bottom, and of course the monster chimney in the back. Jeff has all the spots marked where the cribbing stacks are going to go, so he does a rough dig to save the lifter some time, and then they come in and dig the rest by hand. There are some challenges here because of the landscape. The back of the house slopes off dramatically, so it's hard for us to get our equipment around this side of the house. So pretty much everything has to come around from the garage end to the opposite end of the house. And of course it's been raining, so everything's a muddy mess. Even getting all his equipment and materials needed for the lift in here has been a bit of a challenge, not only because of the slope of the property, but the fact that we are on a very narrow private road, and using his big truck and sending the cribbing and the beams all together isn't a possibility because there really just is no place for him to swing it around and turn it around to get out of here. So he's making a bunch of different trips. We've got the crib stack here. He's running out to get the beams and hopes to get the beams set today. So I'm not going to go into the mechanics of why beams are placed in certain areas, why it was lifted this way, because we are an excavation company. That's what we do best. And we hire a lifting company because that's what they do best. I can show you here, this is that big 10-foot chimney base. We're still really not sure why it was built as wide as it was. It didn't need to be that wide. You can see the two beams up there are what's going to support the chimney. This whole section here, there's really no reason why they built it. We thought it might be supporting a beam or a floor joist up ahead, up at the top, but it actually isn't. But we run into stuff like that all the time. So people always ask, is it possible to lift a slab on grade? Of course it is. Most garages are built basically slab on grade, so they get lifted, but because there's no floor joist, the floor was concrete, which has to be removed, they get supported from the inside and lifted with the rest of the house in that manner. So unfortunately, I did miss the first push up, which is a shame because it was probably one of the smoothest ones ever. We had talked about these bolts, how when a new house is built, the bolts should be bolted into the sill plate of the house, and we could tell in the garage that none of them had nuts on them, and none of the rest of them had nuts on them either, so it was a really easy breakaway on this one. There are a total of 12 crib stacks for this job. Each crib stack has a hydraulic jack on it that supports the beam that's on top. You can see the hydraulic hose runs down from each of them. These are double acting jacks. I know somebody's going to ask me that. But the hydraulic hoses go to the unified jacking machine, which I'll show you next. I always get comments on every single one of my videos that, oh, the sheetrock's all cracked upstairs, and sheetrock screws are popping out all over the place. The lift is very slow, smooth, even. If you've seen any of my time lapses, they're usually over a period of 4 hours, and you can see how straight the house stays. But I'm going to show you a real-time lift. So once the jack is extended to about a foot in height, the crib stacks get rebuilt to the level of the beam. Once the crib stacks are built up to meet the new height, the jacks will be lowered completely down so that they can be moved up to the next height. So that process will continue until we reach the desired height. This house actually went up 6 feet, mainly because of this deck here. I think I mentioned in the other video that normally a deck that's really low to the ground, we will just take off, remove it, put it aside, and put it back on again. But because it's tied into the sunroom, which had to go up with the house, we left it intact. Otherwise we would have had to dismantle the whole thing and put it all back together, and we are all about doing the least amount of work as possible because we don't want to have the homeowners incur any additional expenses that they don't need to. So the deck is 6 foot high now. We won't be able to get our big machinery under it, but we do have smaller equipment that we can get under here, because this wall right here is probably, this is the slab on grade area, but it's probably 8 foot deep into the ground, and so we're gonna have to dig out to the bottom of it because all the footings need to be removed as well. The footings are made out of the same concrete, which is bad, so we don't leave the footings in. We have to pull those out and put new footings in as well.